everyone, welcome back to Anyone Can Cook with Lauren. I am Lauren, and today we're doing night breakfast part 2. These are going to be our pancakes. They are super easy to make and super fluffy. So here in the large mixing bowl, I have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I have a tablespoon of baking powder, which is what makes them super fluffy, 3 tablespoons of sugar, and then I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And we're gonna go ahead and whisk all of these together here. You wanna make sure everything is well incorporated. You could use a sifter too if you have one. That's a fancy way to do it. But I find for the pancakes, especially during fall and Christmas time, the nutmeg and cinnamon really gives it that kind of warm, homey kind of flavor and smell. It already smells great just mixing it around. Right, there we go there. You can see everything is all mixed well together. Okay, and before we start our wet ingredients, we're going to preheat our griddle here. So you can use a skillet on the stove too. If you're gonna do that, you put it to medium heat. You just wanna wait a little bit to do that because it won't take as long to heat up. But I have my griddle here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna preheat the griddle to 350. We always had a griddle growing up, so that was the one thing that I really wanted when I moved out was my own griddle. So for the wet ingredients for our pancakes, I have 2 eggs at room temperature. So super easy trick for room temperature eggs if you don't want to leave them out. All you need to do is put them in a bowl of warm water for a few minutes and then they will warm up and become room temperature eggs. You just don't want to put super hot water. You don't want to accidentally almost cook them. So we're going to go ahead and crack our eggs into our bowl here. And just be careful for shells. We don't want any crunchy pancakes. All right, wipe the hands on the apron. And we're gonna add these to 1.25 cups of milk. You can do this in a bowl too. I just find it's easier to use the measuring cup. So we're gonna make a little mess here and pour our eggs into the milk. And then we also have 3 tablespoons of melted butter. So we're gonna go ahead and add the butter in there too. And we can use the same whisk for everything. Make sure you just break up those egg yolks too. And just whisk it all around together. The milk is also going to be at room temperature. So to get room temperature milk, all you need to do is once you pour it in your bowl or your measuring cup, just put it in the microwave for 30 seconds. Same with the 3 tablespoons of butter. You just put that in a little microwave safe glass or dish and just microwave it for 30 seconds and it'll melt. So there's any stubborn egg yolks, make sure you get those. And just stir it all together here. All right, that looks good. And then you're also gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I don't measure the vanilla because honestly, if there's more vanilla, that's not a big deal. It's actually probably better. So just eyeball 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And the more you cook and the more you get used to measurements, the easier eyeballing things is going to be. I honestly don't measure much anymore when I cook. I measure for you guys, but I don't measure on my own. All right. All right, so the next step that we're going to do is we're going to combine our wet and dry ingredients here, and it's super easy. This isn't super complicated. You don't have to do it in parts. You don't have to do anything special. You just add the wet to the dry and mix it around till the batter forms. You can see how everything's incorporated together nicely. The butter will kind of beat up a little bit on the surface, but that's gonna happen because it's kind of cooling off slowly in the mixture. So we're gonna go ahead and pour this in the bowl. Get as much of that out as we can. going to make sure that we get all of the flour incorporated. Start slow so you don't spatter everywhere. And then once it starts to kind of form a little bit, that's when you can really start to whisk and make sure you get all the flour from the sides and the bottom. And I like to use a clear bowl because then while I'm doing this, I can lift the bowl up and I can see if there's any flour that I've missed, and there is some on the side. So that way I know where to stir and where to scrape. And you want to mix this with the whisk until there are no big clumps and lumps left. You don't want any clumps of flour in your pancakes because they're not going to come out nice and smooth that way. And you don't want to bite into a chunk of baking powder either because it's really bitter. All right, awesome. So you can see our batter here is nice and thick, and you can see little bubbles starting to form too. That's from the baking powder. That's the reason these are going to be so fluffy, because there's a whole tablespoon of baking powder in here. That is what's going to make them rise. And that's the most baking powder I've seen in pretty much any recipe that I have. So we're going to let our griddle finish heating up, and we're going to come back and start putting our pancakes on the griddle. All right, so we have our griddle here. It's heated at 350. So we're going to go ahead and scoop the batter onto the griddle with a 1/4 measuring cup. You can use a slightly bigger measuring cup too if you want bigger pancakes, but we're going to go ahead and start putting these on. Now, typically using a pan on the stove, you would use butter. This is a non-stick griddle, so I don't necessarily have to use butter, and I find on this in particular, it just works better without butter. So we're going to go ahead and make a few plain ones first. I didn't do the best job spacing it out because it started spilling on its own. So we're going to go ahead and just place a few here, and then we'll be a little bit neater after. Now, pancakes are a really easy thing to make, and they're also a really easy thing to freeze and store. So I was a nanny for a long time, and when I was a nanny, I would make pancakes a lot for the kids. And I would make silver dollar pancakes, which are the ones that are about that big. And I would make a bunch and just put them in the freezer, because that way, when it was time to get them ready for school in the morning, it was super easy to just either microwave them or toss them on a pan on the stove to warm them up. And then while they're getting ready for school, breakfast is cooking, and then they're ready to just grab it, eat it, finish and go. And that's one of the best things for kids in the morning, and it's also a lot of fun for them. I personally would also make Mickey Mouse shaped pancakes and, try animal shaped pancakes. Didn't always work out well. And you see the pancakes here, now they're starting to get these bubbles on top. That's how you know that they're almost ready to flip. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll start with this one in a moment, just because that's the first one we put down. So let's see here. And you can even kind of check underneath. And it looks golden brown, but I'm gonna leave it just for another second just to make sure. And I am using a metal spatula on the griddle. You wanna be super careful you don't scrape a non-stick surface with this. I just don't have a silicone or plastic one at the moment, so just being careful with this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and get under here really carefully, and then flip. And do the same with these. Nice and brown. And this recipe literally makes perfect pancakes. And there's this little tiny drop one here. So when we don't put nutmeg in this, we make tiny ones sometimes for our dog like that, just super tiny. But nutmeg is not good for dogs, so if you want to make some pancakes that are safe for your dog to eat, just leave out the cinnamon and nutmeg. Everything else is fine. So we're gonna go ahead and let these finish up, and then we're gonna take them off, put them on a plate, and then we're gonna try some pancakes with some toppings. All right, our pancakes should be almost good here. Yep, they look good. So you'll see on the other side, they're also kind of a golden brown color. That's what you want. Be very careful handling hot pancakes. I am used to doing this, so I am fine handling them, but I don't recommend trying it the first time you make them. See, it makes pancakes in no time. And if you ever find the griddle might be too hot, you can always turn it down a little bit, but I think this one is fine. So we're gonna go ahead, and that second side literally takes maybe a minute to cook, and that's it, because it's mostly cooked from the other side. You're just getting that side not goopy and battery anymore. So we're gonna go ahead and put some on that. We're gonna do some toppings. I have chocolate chips and I have some sliced strawberries. So I'm gonna try and be neater this time. With pouring these on. And we're gonna do some chocolate chip ones first. I have a rogue chocolate chip going over there. If you see me looking in the distance, I can hear our dog getting into mischief somewhere in the house. So with the chocolate chips here, I am going to do a little trick, and I'm going to pour some batter over the chocolate chips as well, because that way they won't stick to the griddle when you flip it over, and it won't burn to the griddle. So you want to just lightly cover them with some batter and let that sit. Once it sets and it starts to bubble, then we're gonna flip these ones over too. Okay, so we're gonna check on these. And sometimes they will get a little bit of a weird shape. So let's see, they're still a little bit wet, not quite cooked through all the way yet, so we're gonna give them a second. So while we're waiting on those, let's get our strawberry ones going. And during intermission here, I did have to go tuck our dog into bed. Because once it gets close to her bedtime, she starts to get into mischief when she's tired, just like a baby. All right, so same as with the chocolate chip ones, except this time we're gonna put some nice fresh strawberry slices. And you can use raspberries too. I like making raspberry pancakes, or you can use bananas. You want to try and center them as best you can. Okay, and same as with the chocolate chips. Just cover it with some batter. They will spread a little, but that's okay. But you just want to make sure that these don't stick to the griddle once it flips over. And then our chocolate chip ones should be ready here. So we're gonna go ahead and flip those over. Oop. And sometimes they do end up kind of colliding a little bit when you flip them. There we go. Now, if you want the batter to be a little bit thicker, you can add a little more flour too. Not too much, but just a little bit. That way they kind of come out a little bit rounder and nicer than that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just move our plain pancake stack to the side. I'm gonna eat that baby pancake. Yum. And we're gonna wait for our strawberry pancakes. So one thing I remember from growing up is mostly my dad, but I think my mom and dad both did. But mostly my dad would make shaped pancakes for us on the weekends. They would try to make animal shaped pancakes, and we would ask, make us a rhino pancake or a hippo pancake, and they would try to make those pancakes the best they could. I remember my dad making Mickey Mouse pancakes or Winnie the Pooh pancakes, and it was just really fun. So I did that when I was a nanny. I did that for the kids in the mornings too, and they enjoyed it. So it's just one of those fun things that is really simple, but it can really make a difference for kids when they're growing up, and give them something nice to remember. And here's a question of the day for you guys, as usual. What is your favorite topping for pancakes? Because I personally really like maple syrup, but my husband is not a fan of maple syrup and he likes using honey, which I had never heard of until being with him. But there are other people out there who use honey. There's also the traditional pancake topping, even back from the colonial era, where it was just lemon juice and sugar. And you would just put both of those sprinkled on the pancake. And some people still do that. I guess some parts of Europe and the UK, they still do that. But you know, it is a debated thing, especially when you live in the US and there's so many different ways that people cook and eat things that everyone has their own preferences of what they like and what they don't like. I personally am just a maple syrup and butter person. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and flip these. There we go. Oh. I'm just getting these all close together today. All right. I think we'll do a couple more chocolate chip ones. Same as before, drizzle a little bit of batter on there so it doesn't stick when you flip them. I'm not going to do as much as last time though, because I want these pancakes to try and stay a little rounder, if I can help it. Doesn't affect the taste at all. I just like a nice round pancake. You can hear the strawberry ones sizzling. So those should be done here in a second. And yes, it looks like those are done. So we're gonna scooch these ones over and we're gonna make some room for the strawberry. Now with a griddle, you will find sometimes there are certain spots on the pan that get hotter than others. This particular corner gets hotter than the rest. I don't know why, but it does. So gotta be careful in that one spot to not overcook anything. And then I think for finishing up our batter, we'll make one more of each. So one more plain, one more chocolate chip, and one more strawberry. There we go. These smell great, by the way. Now with the cinnamon and nutmeg, you don't have to add them. You can leave them out if you just want them to be plain pancakes. I personally really like putting them in there though, because it gives it a really nice flavor. And it reminds you of like the smell of a house with, you know, candles and cookies baking and it's snowing out and it's cold outside, but these are nice and warm. It just gives all of those really nice, you know, feelings. And that's a lot of what spices are, is it gives you feeling as well as the flavor. So the feeling that a food gives you has a lot to do with it. And I was slacking a little bit in this department here, so I'm gonna add the chocolate chips in real quick before it's too late. I'm just gonna give it another second before I flip it over. We'll flip our plain guy here. And we'll get our other chocolate chip ones off. Is that the strawberry or chocolate chip pile? That's a strawberry pile. Here we go. we're gonna move this guy over here. There we go, just to a little bit cooler part of the griddle. We're gonna take our, leave our plain guy on there for one more second. And then I'm gonna scoop the rest of the batter for that strawberry one. All right, so these guys are ready to come off. Nice and fluffy. And we're gonna give this guy a minute and then we're gonna get him off and we're gonna see how we did. All right, you guys, so we're gonna see how we did here. As you can see, this recipe makes a lot of pancakes. It makes just over a dozen pancakes. So this is plenty of pancakes for 3 to 4 people, depending on how many you guys want. And you can always, 1.5, double it. If you're having a ton of people over or doing like a breakfast buffet for a family gathering or brunch, just doubling it gives you almost 30 pancakes. So let's go ahead and see how we did here. I have a chocolate chip one. We're gonna be fun trying that one. And I did warm up some syrup in the microwave in this little dish for about 10 seconds, just so it's not cold. So just gonna, I like a lot of syrup on my pancakes. All right, so let's see how we did here. Oh yeah, nice and fluffy. Yeah, so you can see here, it's dripping all over the place. You can see here, the texture in there is nice and fluffy. So that's how you know we did something right. So let's go ahead and give it a taste. Yeah, these pancakes are great. You can taste the vanilla in there, the nutmeg, the cinnamon. Honestly, another one that would be nice to add maybe would be allspice. I love putting allspice in apple cider. So that could be a great addition to these, especially if you're putting like apple puree in the pancakes too, for like a really fall-oriented flavor. But overall, these are the best pancakes I've ever made. And as soon as I found this recipe and tweaked it the way that I wanted it, I have not used another recipe since. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. As always, the recipe and the instructions are down in the description, and add anything to the comments. If you guys have a breakfast food that you really like that you might want to see, let me know. Or if there's, a special way that you make pancakes or things that you put on pancakes, share it with everyone in the comments. So thanks for tuning in. This has been Anyone Can Cook. And remember, anyone can cook.